Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX. This is the Hot Mic. I'm Rishabh Gulati, and with us today is the Minister for External Affairs for India, Ambassador S. Jaishankar. Ambassador Jaishankar, thank you so much for joining us on this telecast. I know it's the middle of the electoral season. You've been a career diplomat, but what's your perspective on how the elections are faring out?
Well, I think from our perspective, it's been moving well. We've had two phases. I know there's a bit of a debate what the turnout is, etc. There could be some variations compared to the last election, but probably less compared to the one before that. But our overall sense is the ground support for Prime Minister Modi personally and for BJP is very strong. And people will look at our 10 years in the government as a record to judge us by. So we feel there is actually a pro-incumbency feeling that people would go by what's real, what's been delivered, what they know is more likely to happen, rather than either promises which are not responsible, or promises which actually point to us going back to the past, a past which many of us have come out of with great difficulty.
So I'm going to ask you on that, but in terms of last time around, we had just come out of the surgical strike, Balakot. So the immediate foreign policy environment was a big election ticket item. This time G20 has happened. How much of that vibe, that India's place in the world as a leader of the global South, India's prestige, India's image of Biden, and some foreign leaders, literally respecting the country, I would say, not just the Prime Minister, and touching his feet. How much of that vibe is part of the electoral process this time around?
Last time around, by the way, I was a private citizen. I was in the corporate world. I watched it from outside. But this time I can tell you something which I find very interesting. I've done about 6 or 7 states during this campaign so far. I find a lot of interest in foreign policy. It's not typical. It's not typical, this doesn't have to be necessarily the big cities. I was in Bikaner. I was in Rajkot. I mean, these are, you can say tier 3 towns or cities in a way. But in places like this today, there is actually, my sense is a feeling, there are 2 aspects to it. One, a sense of pride, a feeling that, look, we are actually establishing our place in the world. And people are respecting us more. G20 is part of it. People, the speculation was that we will crash land, we will be a mess, but it went the other way, and the public understands that. The other part of it, I think, is also what does the public see on the TV or on the news, read in the newspaper, see in social media. They see a war in Ukraine. They see fighting in Gaza. They see the whole Red Sea, Arabian Sea, drones and missile strikes. They see the tension on our own border with China. They see things happening in the South China Sea, US-China relations becoming very tense, terrorism of various kinds happening. So there is a sense today the world is in turbulence, that things are not good and not likely to be good for some time. So I feel somewhere there's also a desire to ensure that the government is in responsible hands, experienced hands. I mean, in a way, an unspoken question is, to whom would you trust the country at a time when the world is very difficult? Whose hands would you like to see on the wheel? So I think that's an issue too.
Okay, but when it comes to assessments of elections happening in India, sometimes, Ambassador, you know this better than I, friends or foe alike would like instability. They would like to have a sort of unsure, maybe an even insecure government, because that is not decisive and that is probably prone to suggestion from abroad. Are there active efforts, to the best of your knowledge, underway in order to influence elections in India?
Well, Depends on how you visualize influence. Okay, uh, the truth is, just look at the international media, particularly the Western media, for maybe about 2 months now. You see a barrage of articles, coming at India, at the election system, at the environment, specific political issues. What is the overall tenor? Overall tenor is, oh my God, these guys may actually get 400 seats. Is it really good for democracy if somebody wins big? So, which means their preference is somebody doesn't win big, or somebody doesn't win, or somebody else wins. So there is, some of them have actually been honest enough to actually express a preference, but many of them, it's more like they know what is the likely outcome of this election. So it's more like you're trying to damage it, because that's probably the best that you can do. So yes, in that sense, I would say that perhaps more than any other election that I can remember, that we've had a sustained international, Western, particularly criticism of the entire election ethos. But that's from them. Now, what other people do, other players do, a lot of that is in the realm of intelligence. Today you get morph stuff, you get deep fakes, you get
the audios of the Prime Minister, of the video of the Home Minister. Where is this coming from?
So, different things are coming from different people, and different forces. There are people within the country, there probably are people, outside the country. Because, look, do understand one thing. We are today globally big players. Okay. When you reach the number 5 position, and you will soon reach the number 3 position in the world economically, what happens in India matters to people. They have vested interest. They want people they would rather prefer in positions of decision making. So I think this is the reality. We are grown-ups here. We have to accept this is the world in which we live, and we have to prepare for it.
Are there certain members in opposition parties in India who perhaps would be prone to such influence from abroad?
Well, I would put it to you differently. I think we have seen, not now, for some time now, some years now, some parts of the opposition who consciously go out of India, badmouth the country, run it down in different ways. Look, I have no problem if it is politics, you and I are competing. I'm not going to say nice things about you, okay? That's natural. But I don't have to run down the whole system. I don't have to say, the country is falling apart, all institutions are have given way, there is no checks and balances. When you say constitution is in danger, it's ridiculous. This constitution from 1950 has lasted us 74 years, and to me it is something which for most sensible people is the cornerstone of how we built a polity. If in fact anybody has messed with the constitution, it's actually the Congress party. Of the 105-6 odd amendments, probably 80% of them are theirs. But yet, see, this whole thing, constitution is in danger, election system is questionable, they've called courts, you've had criticism of the courts. So, I would say I have no issues if people, personally, I don't take my politics outside the country. Whenever I go out, people ask me political questions, I say, please come home, I'll be happy to talk to you. I don't do politics outside. But let's assume your standards are less exacting than mine. I don't even, mind, or maybe not mind that much, saying, okay, do some political point scoring, but don't run down the country outside, because then you are actually damaging something much bigger. And for what purpose?
So, if a Rahul Gandhi goes to Harvard or goes to Cambridge and says these things, which you just mentioned, Is it because he's being misguided, he's being misinformed? Is it his advisors are all over the place? So where's it coming from?
Look, I can't answer that. Only he can answer it. I mean, today, to my mind, some of it, I can only guess, is a sentiment which comes from lack of success or traction at home. And then you feel, okay, let me go out, and there'll be like-minded people out there who are more likely to buy into this and support it. So I will set, if my domestic narrative is not catching on, I now try to set an international narrative in the hope that the domestic narrative will pick up on it. So, I mean, some of it is that, but some of it I think is a genuine belief. I mean, look, you mentioned his visit to Cambridge. I think all Indians, I would advise Indians to go and listen to his lectures. You should see the admiration for China in that lecture. It comes through repeatedly. He will never criticize Belt and Road. I mean, a Belt and Road which violates our sovereignty. So outside, he will praise China, but at home, he will pretend to take very nationalistic positions. So some of it, I think, is frustration. Some of it, I think, is, the belief that external narratives will help him. And some of it, I think, is actually his genuine admiration, which in their case is an ideological admiration going back to Nehru. Which is coming up.
Ideological admiration for China. Has he spoken to you on China? I remember one time he was in a committee meeting. He was mentioning some things. What was the advice or his understanding of China?
We've had a few conversations. He, of course, also gave a public comment that yes, there were shortcomings in my understanding of China. And now I just happen to be the guy who spent 4.5 years there as ambassador, but apparently that doesn't matter. So he clearly fancies himself as someone who's steeped in understanding of China. But when you look at some of the things he says, I mean, what else can I say but God bless him?
When one of the key family advisors who's been there 40, 50 years sitting in the US says, the Americans have an inheritance tax, we should, apply this in India. And the party then runs away from it. But these are the key advisors. Do you think a lot of this comes from the advisory process surrounding Rahul Gandhi of the Congress?
See, what they have been doing is actually trying to have it both ways. I mean, if you see, I'll come to that particular remark. But say, if you look at the manifesto, which I think most people haven't done, but nevertheless, they will not refer to the CAA, but yet a Chidambaram will go and talk about a CAA in Kerala. They will not talk about 370, but yet their partners, their supporters will openly say, we are completely against 370, but they will not say it in the manifesto. But they know national sentiment is for what was done in 2019. So when it comes to issues like inheritance tax, you got to really understand what is at the heart of the thinking. The heart of the thinking is really the policies of the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s. They still do not believe those policies were wrong. I mean, they brought the country to ruin in 1991. It took a Narasimha Rao to change it. And by the way, that's why they don't like Narasimha Rao. People think they don't like Narasimha Rao because he's not part of the family. But they don't like Narasimha Rao because he actually went against what these people deeply believe.
So you mentioned this going back into the past. So is this an ideological debate in this election as well, between a caste census, between wealth redistribution, X-ray of people's houses and how much they earn, is about minorities and Muslim quotas? Is there an ideological difference?
No, absolutely. You have today, in a way, two views, I can say. Okay. One is the view which Prime Minister Modi has expressed, embodied, delivered, administered. That is there before the people. I think this is an alternative view. It is a view that what we did in the pre-reform era was not wrong. In fact, we should do it again. It is a view that, your earning, your saving, your property, we the state if they ever get to be the state. We are the best arbiters of who will have what, who should get what. So when you have statements like so and so will have a first claim, I mean, what does it mean? That means they are saying if they ever get to government, we will decide who will have first claim on what? On everybody's property, because you are talking of a survey. You know, government doesn't have to survey itself. Okay, when you are saying survey, I'm surveying you. Okay, I'm not surveying you PSU or a government asset. So you're actually saying I'm going to do a national survey. I believe in redistribution. I believe in taxing. I mean, what is this? This is license Raj, this is tax Raj, this is permit Raj. This is actually family Raj. We know what is best for everybody. You know, we have many terms which have been used very pejoratively for us. Let me tell you, their idea of what is the political system in India should be an electoral monarchy. That there will be elections, but finally we will decide what is to be done.
You mentioned pejoratives. When this information goes abroad, that this is the conversation going on, and there are China plus one logics and investors looking to line up, and Jamie Dimon has been talking about a lot of practicalities in India, 400 million toilets being built and all that. Do investors start worrying? Do they start getting concerned, or do they take it as a pinch of salt, or this is elections, this is okay?
No, I think investors believe these guys have no chance. I think that's why they're not worried. I don't know whether investors think are they serious or not serious about what they believe. I think the investors basically believe, okay, somebody in India may be saying these things, but these guys are really not going to have any say in after the election. So they shrug their shoulders.
Okay, speaking of divisive politics, let me take this on, because we keep doing two-nation theory. Here we are 80 years later. We have an extremely good association now with the Saudis. You have literally the highest honors are being given to India's Prime Minister by the Emiratis as well. A massive temple has come up very recently in the UAE. How is that the world does not see a two-nation theory, but we still ourselves are convinced that it exists?
I think we are regurgitating our debates because that has become the electoral basis for much of the opposition. But when you go outside India, I mean, it's a very interesting example that you have raised. I look at people ask me in 10 years, what would be the number one change in our foreign policy? The biggest shift? I would say actually it's our Gulf relationships. Now, that's almost counterintuitive, because the narrative is, BJP, very Hindu nationalist, etc., etc. So I think we need to ask that question. If that narrative was true, why is it the Gulf is today embracing us, dealing with us, respecting us in a way? And I'll tell you the reason. Because I don't think this vote bank politics, because I think that's really what it is. The vote bank politics which started after our independence, where there was a conscious attempt to actually create a minority vote bank. And I don't think the Gulf buys it. To them it's irrelevant. They see today in India, an India which takes a lot of pride in its culture, civilization, history, traditions, and the people in the Gulf say, oh, guess what, guys, we do the same. For them, what we are doing is nothing surprising. We are actually behaving like a normal country. Please do understand one thing. In the West today, vote bank politics is strong, sadly. But do not think that that's universal. It was an Indian failing. Unfortunately, in some Western countries, it's become a Western import or a Western absorption. But in large parts of the world, they are not too bothered by this whole vote bank thing. For them, you're proud of your country, culture, economy, achievements. Great, so are they.
Okay, I want to take you down to the south of India, because Tamil Nadu has already voted. Your family comes from there. there is this new leader that the BJP has found, who's the BJP state president Tamil Nadu,
Annamalai, yeah,
he's just contested from Coimbatore. He's making a lot of waves down there. We've seen the Prime Minister at the UN speak about it. Of course, Parliament inaugural happened with the Sengol. We have our Indic civilizational roots in all of Southeast Asia, which you've spoken about, the Shivlings in Vietnam, all of which, of course, originate in
And the
South India.
BJP is committed to establishing Thiruvalluvar centers across the world. These will be our cultural centers. Thiruvalluvar is a great Tamil sage, you know.
Yeah. In fact, we're sitting right on Subramanian Bharati Marg as we speak in New Delhi. Okay, let me take you then. You mentioned Kashmir, sir. 370. What has actually changed in India's global diplomacy? Because when 370 was abrogated, did the Americans say this is your internal matter, or was it in the past 7th Fleet sanctions?
You see, when 370 happened, I was not going to wait for somebody to tell me what it was about. I mean, it's my domestic business. So we made it very, very clear to people, to everybody, that here was a temporary provision of the Constitution. Please read my Constitution, the word temporary is out there. The meaning of temporary in English language is it comes to an end at some point. It was not even meant to last this long. And that the time has come to deal with it. Other countries amend their constitution or do things with their laws. So it's frankly our business.
Okay, Balakot. I mean, the Pakistanis famously said that one kawwa died and two things were damaged. But subsequently afterwards, I mean, books are being written about this, films are being made about it. How did we convince the Pakistanis that Wing Commander Abhinandan would be back on Indian soil in 48 hours?
Well, look, I must say I was not in the government at that time. So I've heard various accounts of what happened. I am generally reticent commenting on things about which I don't
public
have,
account from a Pakistani MP says that their foreign minister was sweating and his legs were shaking. And he said that the Indians will be here at 9 o'clock if he doesn't go.
Look, as I said, I was not in the government. I'm generally, I talk with first-hand knowledge.
Okay, so the other big global crisis, you mentioned Ukraine. Was there an Indian role? Was there a genuine risk of a nuclear escalation and we played a role in calming waters, maybe the Prime Minister personally himself?
There have been a number of issues at a global level on Ukraine. There was a grain corridor issue. There was a issue of supply of fertilizers because much of the world was dependent on fertilizers from Ukraine and Russia. There was an issue of attacks on the nuclear power plant. There's a place called Zaporizhzhia, which came under attack. And there was this concern expressed by some countries about possible escalation to the nuclear level. At various points of time, and you will understand, some things sort of in our business stay within the room. But at various points of time, either somebody has asked us to do something, or or we ourselves have felt that our advice or suggestion or point of view will be heard with a degree of seriousness. So, a lot of these issues, yes, there has been diplomatic activity, but we have our idea is to make more of a difference in the outcome rather than go out there and say in headlines we did this or we did that. That's not been
okay. One for the history books, but do you think the outcome will be a happy one, that a positive role was played by India?
I think today the fact that, look, we just had the Foreign Minister of Ukraine here a few weeks ago. Yes. We've had a steady relationship with Russia. I was there at the end of the year last year. The fact that today both countries clearly value their relationship with India, and are keen that in some way or the other we we get more closely involved with all of this. I think that should tell you what
Okay,
they
fair
think
enough.
of
So,
us.
so that leads me to my next question. How do we then maintain a good association with the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Israelis, and the Iranians at the same time? Is it a nightmare, or is it more doable than one thinks?
Well, I tell people it is sabka saath, sabka vikas at an international level. You know, that look, if you are confident, if you are well-meaning, if you are fair and reasonable about your own interest and respectful about those of others, it's possible to carry different people and different countries. They may have problems with each other, but why must I always, be at the beck and call or be under pressure from others to choose? It is often my interest not to make those binary choices. So we have today consciously, that's why Prime Minister uses this word, which is there in our manifesto as well, Bharat as Vishwa Bandhu, that we have the ability today to have good relations with, let us say, Russia and with the US, or with UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain, with Israel and with Palestine. So I think it's a weak leadership which feels, don't go, if I go there, I must necessarily tie up with one, or don't even go there because you will come under pressure. We are big enough today to handle that kind of.
It's never been seen. The operations that the Indian Navy is currently doing, anti-piracy operations, the scale of them, literally on a daily basis, we are getting reports of rescue operations. I've never seen it before. It's probably unprecedented. Yes. We are not technically part of any task force that is doing it, but why was it felt important that we need to be policing these international waters?
Well, first of all, when you say that it's never been done before, I mean, this operation has never been done before. The way we stepped up for Sri Lanka, $4.5 billion package has never been done before. The way we supplied COVID vaccines to 99 countries and 2 UN organizations never been done before. So we are in an era of never been done before. But this particular one is important because our own self-interest is at stake. Much of our trade goes through those waters. Secondly, as I said, there is a global expectation about us. We also need to carry our share of responsibility. Now, responsibility doesn't mean I have to join somebody else's operation, because as I said before, those binaries that you have to be with us, otherwise you are not in the game, or you have to choose this or that. We are today, as I keep telling people, we are India, we have our own side, we have our own interest. So we have today, I think at the peak times, I think roughly about 21 ships are committed to it. Yeah. And you are right. I mean, we are one of the key players in ensuring that there is maritime security. I mean, our record today in terms of saving ships, in fighting piracy, in putting out fires, I mean, this is a very, very commendable record, and I think the world knows
and for the record, not just Indian ships or ships headed to India. Of course, we've rescued Pakistani sailors as well. Okay, I know time is limited, sir. I wanted to ask you, to your memory, when was your first interaction with Narendra Modi?
Oh, I can tell you very clearly, November 2011. I can tell you very clearly because I was ambassador in China, and he was chief minister in Gujarat. He came on a visit to China, and that's when I met him.
At what point of time were you convinced that one is an extension, of course, in tenure as foreign secretary, but one is joining the government as minister? Was it a convincing process, or did you feel that this person is taking the country in the direction where I want to contribute to?
The two are different situations. My foreign secretary appointment happened, Obama had come for Republic Day. So it happened at that time. But it was I was a civil servant. Okay, civil servants are shifted. It's part of our life. It's something which, however unexpected, but it is still very much within the system to do something like that. The move into politics and as a cabinet member was very different because it was a different world. I mean, I tell people, I mean, even today there's nobody from my family in politics. The thought had never crossed my mind. I had retired after 41 years in the government. I had joined a in the corporate world. I had a very good job. I was enjoying my job. Then the Prime Minister met me and told me that he would like me to join the cabinet and be part of the team that he was constituting. So it was very unexpected, and I had to make a decision at fairly short notice.
Well, you made the right one. Good to have you in Team India. We are desperately short of time, but I have a couple of other questions. Narendra Modi, as his vision, okay, is it a utopian vision when we talk about Vishwa Bandhu and Vasudeva Kutumbakam? But at the same time, we have a very realistic approach of ghar mein ghusko and stand up for yourselves and India's self-interest. How would you define it? Does he fit into some neat position in the theories?
No, look, because you are practical doesn't mean you don't have ideals. I can want a better world, and I can be practical enough to say these 1, 2, 3 steps are steps to building a better world. I mean, to me, let me take the 2 examples you're saying. Vasudeva Kutumbakam, okay, Vishwa Bandhu. I want a better world. One of the things the world wants is be a Atankwad Mukt world, that you want to fight terrorism. Now I give you a practical thing. If I don't fight terrorism and it's directed at me, how can I go out there and preach saying, oh, by the way, let's all fight terrorism? So to me, these are not contradictions. He has a vision for the world. He has a vision for India. He has a plan for the world. He has practical ideas for the world. He has very practical policies for India. So they're not contradictory.
Okay, you mentioned terrorism, that former 2611 prosecutor has just joined the Bharatiya Janata Party. Sure. Is there a difference when we say that in 10 years no major Indian metropolis has seen a terror attack? Is there something dramatically different that has happened? Is it the surgical strikes? Is it better intelligence? What are we getting right?
Look, that's a complex issue, because a lot of it must necessarily, obviously always be behind a certain veil. But overall, there is a message in the last 10 years. The message in the last 10 years is, unlike what happened at 2611 in Mumbai, we will not turn the other cheek. If anything happens in India, there will be consequences to other people. I think that message has gone through loud and clear.
For mysterious reasons, a lot of people who've been involved in hijackings, people who've been involved in terror activities, in India, or have sponsored or trained them, they're mysteriously dropping dead. Some are being shot by unknown gunmen. What's going on? Do you watch back and say, well, their comeuppances come their way?
I think, as you said, God works mysteriously.
So what do you make of what has happened with the Canadians? And I'm sure you've seen the Washington Post article just yesterday, and the
ministry, and I'm sure you saw a comment on it as well.
It's irresponsible, you said. So why are they doing it now? Where is this coming from?
Well, there are, we discussed this earlier. I think we've had a pattern in respect of some sections of the Western media, which have actually been continuously critical of us. They picked up this issue now, and often what they do is to take something and then give it a twist, and take it in a direction they want to take it. But it's not just here. Look at, for example, how they covered COVID, how they cover any economic challenge that we have. In many cases, there is a very strong ideological desire today to see India fail. That because for them, this is not the India that they want. This is not the India which will be listening to them for directions and advice. So this is like.
But Minister, when it becomes absurd, it would be absurd for us to be hosting the IRA or doing referendums for Quebec in India and their independence. It would be absurd for us to be discussing and hosting, the Scottish independence referendum in India. It becomes absurd, but they are happy to do it. If you flip it around, it sounds absurd, but they are happy to host the Khalistanis in London or or in Surrey or wherever in Canada. How do you deal with the absurd?
Because the reality of history is many countries believe that what they preach abroad doesn't need to be practiced at home, that they can have multiple standards. what you call absurd, they take it as their entitlement. I mean, I give you a very practical example. You know, we had the Prime Minister of Canada saying some things which were frankly none of his business on the farmers' agitation in India. And yet you look at how he behaved with his own truckers' strike. See the difference. To use your word, absurd, but yet he did it.
So why explain ourselves? Why not, for example, these things are happened to us. We are victims of a lot of these things. Our progress is being held back because of foreign actors not wanting us to succeed. I mean, to this day, we don't know. Perhaps in that mysterious plane crash that happened in Mont Blanc in Switzerland, where the head of our nuclear program, Homi Bhabha, was killed, we don't know what happened there. The investigation didn't happen. Why not open up these files and push on the other foot?
Look. When people are out to push us, target us, we need to push back. When they say things about us, we need to argue. We need to put our point of view across. But I'm a realist, okay? I know it's a competitive world. I know there are people who are unhappy with whatever we have achieved. But let's not slide into a conspiracy theory of the world. Not everybody is out to get us, okay? There are also people out there who are our partners. There are people who are investing in us, collaborating with us, who are actually in many ways our friends and well-wishers. So let's not paint everybody with the same brush. I think we have to be intelligent about it. We have to figure out give me any of these countries. I would say that there is a spectrum of views out there. Because one spectrum is targeting us. Don't react against the entirety of that spectrum of that country. Right. I think we need to pick and choose. This is what diplomacy and this is what international relations is about.
Okay, Minister, last question. How are things now with China? We've seen a quieter situation, which is a relief on the Indo-Tibet border. But what is your assessment of what is going on? Is because with the Philippines, to whom we've just sold the BrahMos missiles, in Taiwan, is there a sense that someone's itching for a fight? What is the sense you're getting?
I think we have different issues. I would not necessarily put them all. I mean, there is some commonality, which you mentioned, but each one is also specific. Where our own issue is concerned, I think what we have seen from 2020 is actually bringing large forces to the line of actual control. Obviously, it is done with an intent, because it is a violation of multiple agreements, and they know that there are these multiple agreements. So it's not that it is done in ignorance of it. So there is an intent. The intent clearly, if somebody brings that kind of forces to line of actual control, is a coercive or a attempt to actually pressurize us. And our answer has been to respond robustly, that even in the middle of COVID, we have counter-deployed. I mean, we are wherever they have come to the line of LAC, we have also gone up there, and it's a very at the moment, I would say there is a prolonged face-off across a fairly large band of territory. But to me, at the end of the day, there is a larger posture and behavior out there. The posture is, what kind of relationship do you want if your attempt has been to focus on pressurizing a neighbor? And number two, what kind of relationship do you want if you do not adhere to written agreements? And finally, how can any neighbor, if you disturb peace and tranquility in your border areas, how can the other neighbor then say the rest of the relationship carries on? So there will be the ripple impact. It will spread across other sectors. Okay. So they have to understand that.
Okay, we could spend all day here because I want to ask you about maps and about POK, but our time has run out. Minister Jaishankar, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX on the Hot Mic.
Thank you. Great pleasure.